Hello. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about bicycle gears, how to use them, and what they're for. So bicycle gears, I think it's one of those which people get confused about. They don't really know how to use them. They don't know what they're for, and they end up just sticking it in one gear and leaving it there. So the point of bicycle gears is to basically make your bike ride as efficient as you can. So understanding bike gears can be, a bit daunting and a bit confusing. So if you're looking at bike gears on a website, you might see that it's got 18 gears, 21 gears, or 9 gears. And what does all that mean? So on this bike, you've got 3 rings at the front and 8 at the back. So that is a 24 speed bike. So you do essentially have 24 gears, but it can be a little bit confusing. You think, well, why do I have 24 gears? I only need a few. So the simple way of sort of looking at it is that you've got 8 gears at the back and 3 at the front, and the 3 is just a different variation of what you've got at the back. So for your everyday riding, you're just going to want to keep your chain in the middle ring, and we'll just call that your everyday gear. So if you're just riding around on the flat, you just want to leave it in the middle gear, and you can just alternate between the gears on the back. So your biggest at the back is going to be slightly easier, and the smallest is going to be harder. And then you've got your inner and outer ring. So your inner ring is going to be easier for climbing up hills. So some of us refer to the tiny ring as a granny ring. And yeah, just think when you're riding up a hill, what would your granny do? She's going to want to be in a nice easy gear to help you get up that hill, and you're not going to be slugging it up that hill in a hard gear. So you can drop that into the smallest, and then you've still got the range of gears at the back. And then your biggest ring is essentially for going down hills, or if you're on a really smooth flat road with a tailwind, you can jump it up into this biggest ring, and that's going to give you a nice hard gear. There are certain gears that you wouldn't want to use. So if you're on the smallest on the front, you're probably not going to want to be in the smallest on the back. You'll find your chain line is going to be at quite an angle, and it's essentially what you're doing is you've got your smallest gear, which is your easiest gear, and then your smallest gear at the back is your hardest gear. So, and the same for on the front. If you're in your biggest ring, you're probably not going to want to go biggest because you're going to have that diagonal chain line. Doesn't really make sense. So when you're in the biggest, you're probably just going to be sort of mid-range. So you might be smallest, biggest, and then biggest, smallest. So if you're not too sure, this mechanism here, which some people do refer to as a mech, it is called a derailleur. So this helps shift your gears, and it does add tension onto the chain. So that will expand as you're changing gear. So as you're going from the smallest to the biggest, that derailleur will stretch out, and it just allows to keep the tension on the chain when you're in every gear. So when you shift your gear here, you can see that move. So that is feeding back. It's connected via a cable. So when you're pulling this shifter on the right hand side, that is essentially pulling the gear cable, which is allowing you to shift. And so front derailleur, rear derailleur, and then you've got your chain set and your crank arms. Your cogs on the back, you would refer to that as a cassette. So some bikes it might be a freewheel, which is a screw-on fitment, so it screws onto a thread on the rear hub, and then a cassette, it slides on to some notches, and then you do it up with a locking ring. But they're going to be the same thing, and you're not really going to need to know the difference unless you're changing it out for a new one. And then you've got a chain on there connecting the front to the back, so as you input your pedaling on the front, it will then pull your rear wheel with you, therefore you are moving. So if you're ever looking for a replacement chain, which one do you get? So the simple thing to do when you're looking for a chain is just count the amount of cogs on the back. So if you've got 6, then it's a 6-speed chain, and if you've got 10, it's a 10-speed chain. The one thing to note is like a 6, 7 and 8 pretty much use the same chain, and then you've got 10, 11 and then 12 speed, and they're all going to be slightly narrower. So a 12-speed chain is narrower than an 8-speed chain because you've got more cogs per distance. So the gap between the frame and the hub stays the same, but you've got more gears. So 12 gears within that gap needs a narrower chain, and then a 6-speed, there's more gap between those chain rings, so you need a wider chain. So some of the terminology that you might see when you're looking at bikes is people might call it a 3x or a 2x or a 1x, and that basically is referring to the front. So this bike is a 3x8. You can also get a 2x10, 2x9, and then you can also see a 1x10 1x9, 1x11, 1x12, and that just means one ring on the front times the 11 gears on the back, and that is how you get your gear in. So an 11-speed bike tends to be one chainring at the front and 11 at the back. And I'll just grab my bike just to show you what a 1x setup would look like. So you may have seen this bike in previous videos, but this is a 1x setup. So it's just got one single ring at the front and 11 gears at the back. So as you can see, just one single and 11, and this cassette is much wider. So this ring up here gives you a nice easy gear for climbing and then a hard gear for the back. And for what I need, you basically either just climbing up a climb or descending or riding along the flat. So you've essentially, just with those 11 gears, you've got every gear that you need. Whereas when you are just riding on the road and commuting and you don't cycle as much, you might find that you want more gears. So with a 3x setup, there is just less jump between the gears. You might just find it's a slightly smoother gearing on there. But for what I need, it does get rid of the derailleur on the front. So you've just got one single ring at the front and then 11 at the back. So with this sort of style of bike, you do have the shifter on the handlebars and then the derailleur at the front. So it is a little bit more maintenance. You do have another cable to change if it ever goes, and you do have another set of gears to service and tune up. But that is basically what you're going to see. You're either going to see 3 gears at the front and like 7 or 8 at the back, or you might get a 2x, or you might get a 1x. And what you want to do is just keep a consistent cadence, really. So you'll have a comfortable rotation that you will just do on the flat, and you want to sort of maintain that throughout your bike ride. You don't want to get to a hill and be really slugging, and then the same goes as if you're going down a hill, you don't want your legs to be spinning super fast. So you even want to change your gears maybe slightly before a hill. So if you can see a hill approaching, then you maybe want to just shift up to a slightly easier gear and keep that cadence the same. So you'll have a certain revolution that you feel comfortable with, and if you can see a hill, just forward plan a little bit and just try and keep that cadence the same. And then as you get to the hill, you will just be able to put it in a nice easy gear and just go up that hill with the same cadence that you were doing on the flat. And the same goes for if you're going down a hill and you're spinning too fast, you can then either change it up into your big ring or go into a smaller ring on the back, which will allow a nice harder gear. So if you understand what I mean, your feet are still spinning at the same pace, whether you're on the flat, on a climb or on a descent, and that's just going to allow you to cycle for longer without tiring out on a hill and really struggling and getting halfway up and stalling. So you see a lot of people, they will just leave it in one gear and they're going up the hill in the hardest gear that you've got, and then they'll get halfway up and get off. But if they knew how to use their gears and they just forward planned and just change your gear accordingly to the terrain that you're on, they probably would just get up that hill fine, and their cycle ride will be much more enjoyable. So I've left my bike light on. One thing to note is always change your gear as you're pedaling. So if you just click your gear like that, it's not going to change unless you're pedaling. So just let off a little bit of power as you're shifting. So one thing you learn to do is, obviously you do want to be pedaling, your cranks do want to be rotating as you change gear, but just don't apply loads of pressure to the cranks. Maybe just come off slightly easier, change, still spin the cranks, allow the chain to shift up to the gear, and then just carry on pedaling as you would before. If you're going to put too much pressure through it, you might find that your gears skip a little bit. So always be pedaling forwards when you shift your gear. That'll allow a nice smooth gear change. And if you're between gears, don't pedal backwards. It will just jam up and it will just drop down the cassette, and it'll sound horrible. So yeah, in this video, all I really wanted to do is just explain the purpose of your gears, how to use them, and what they're there for. They are just there to make your life a bit easier, and there is a certain gear for a certain type of riding. So just like a car, you wouldn't use fifth going up a really steep hill, and you wouldn't also use first going along a motorway. So similar sort of thing really. They're there just to help your ride, make it more efficient, and just make it more enjoyable, and your bike ride will probably last long. Right, so my phone has just run out of storage, so I don't know how much I've filmed of that. So you've got this setup, which is like a 3x, and then I'll just show you my 1x bike just to give you a little bit of comparison. This is my gravel bike, which has got 1x gearing. For me, I just think I like the single ring on the front. It just eliminates having a derailleur on the front, saves having another cable, and for me, I've got enough gears there with the 11-speed gears for what I want, and it just keeps it a nice simple setup. I don't have a derailleur on the front. But yeah, I think that's everything for now. I don't want to get too technical. I don't want to get into any sort of technical things. It's just a little bit of advice on how gears work and what they're there for. Yeah, moving forward, I'm going to keep the bicycle content for Sunday at 6 p.m. So I do want to dive into some other videos. Got some motorcycle stuff, some car stuff, and also some photography content that I want to put out, but I will keep that separate. So that's probably going to be on Wednesdays, and then the push bike stuff will be on a Sunday. So that's it for now. Really do appreciate all the feedback that I've had so far. It's been a really exciting journey, just sort of 2 weeks in. And I'm really excited to see where things go from here. So thanks for tuning in. If you like the videos so far, then give us a subscribe and a like on the videos, and maybe just comment to let me know what you'd like to see next. But yeah, that's it for now. See you in the next one. Thank you.